Hello and welcome to another book video. This time we're talking about The Sundown Motel by Simone St.James, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, The Invited by Jennifer McMahon, and Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. Alright, let's get started. The Sundown Motel by Simone St.James. This book has two storylines that are in the same location, but at different points in time. It has some small town, big spooky vibes, and is all in all a pretty satisfying read. First off, you have the 1980-something timeline where Viv, who is a young adult who's looking to change her life and become a big star in New York, ends up working the night shift at a sketchy hotel in the small town of Fell, New York. Fell is one of those blink and you miss it kind of places, and Viv works the night shift. Then you have the modern day setting where Carly, who is Viv's niece, finds herself in Fell, working that same shift. Instead of seeking stardom, though, Carly is wondering what happened to Viv. She's there to solve the mystery of the aunt that she never met. Where is Viv? What happened in Fell back then? This is a full-on ghost story, crime thriller combo. I really enjoyed the parallel stories and seeing Fell in the two different time periods. There are plenty of creepy ghost moments that unsettle you, just enough for them not to be the driving scare factor of the story. There are even more moments where the story is more bubbling with suspense. The book is a commentary a bit on how women are perceived in society and just how unsafe it can be for them. And this really resonated with me almost as much as The Ghost did. Next up, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first in a series. The series is the Alex Stern series. This is dark academia urban fantasy. It takes place at Yale. The basic premise is that Alex, who can see ghosts, is given a chance to attend Yale and work for an organization that keeps all the secret societies or houses magic in check. Alex is a powerhouse of a character. She is all rough edges and tragic backstory and sheer willpower. I loved her as a main character. Her instincts for self-preservation and her skepticism felt fresh, especially within this genre. The story is mostly from her perspective, with some bits from her mentor, Darlington, a senior student at Yale. And all in the form of mostly flashbacks where Alex is recounting that first year as a student. The magic system in the story is different, and it's different from each house, ranging from dark occult practices that involve, cutting up living people to read their intestines to more mundane ones where it's simply using the energy generated from a frat party. And the premise is simply that Alex is trying to solve a mystery and figure out if anything has to do with the other 8 houses. This book is also a bit of a commentary. It has a lot to say about college culture, and after having read and watched several reviews, I kind of feel it's important to point out that the author has previously written in the YA range, and this story is definitely not a YA book. So if you go into it expecting YA sensibilities, you're going to be shocked. Also, the author attended Yale, according to a lot of the reviews that I've seen. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with the amount of accuracy and just detail that's given throughout the novel. The very real things that happen in this story are very potentially triggering, especially if you go into this thinking that you're reading YA. Alright, next up we have The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Okay, so this one isn't like any other special genre qualifications. This is a classic horror story by an Indigenous author. It follows a group of Indigenous men, specifically Blackfeet men, through their lives as they are pursued by an entity that is seeking revenge. The story encapsulates their lives from the moment of their big mistake, a hunting trip turned elk massacre, to the time when it catches back up to them, leaving a body count as it goes. The four men are all living their lives the only way they can, which of course kind of opens the way for some really hard-hitting social context. Each man has found their own path that includes the modern racism they still encounter and endure, and kind of where they each settled in relation to that balance between their traditional beliefs and upbringing and the rest of society, and how it often discounts them. The book is told in 3 parts, which is ultimately to build this crazy suspenseful and intense showdown that is thoroughly modern and ancient, and somehow both at the same time. Part 1 is one of the men who works where he can to survive day to day, and as soon as you think that you're just going to like sink into this slow despair of a novel, it kind of just slaps you in the face and reminds you that you're reading horror. The second part is the tempo just like quadruples, and you find yourself with a man who seems to have a bit more of a balance to his life, with his work and his home and his friends, but he has an unsettling lack of ties to his origins. You don't really have to be reminded that this is horror once you get to this part of the book, but you definitely want to peek around the corner and see what the heck is coming up. Stephen Graham Jones is going to keep taking you places where you don't expect. They're going to be darker than you imagine, and then bam, you're in part 3, and there is less build up. It's like the pace is so perfectly timed for the story, and once you're finally kind of out of patience, you find yourself somewhere completely uncharted and feeling wholly horrified. I really, really enjoyed the roller coaster that this book was. I say this a lot, but the thing that leaves me happy with horror is finishing a book and feeling not that happy feeling where you're like, oh, that was an amazing book, and you're kind of like bittersweet sad because it's over. The feeling that I love to get from horror is just like, what the fuck did I just read? And you're kind of looking at the world a little bit differently, and everything feels kind of a little bit wrong now, and that's definitely the feeling, that unsettled, uncanny, indescribable emotion. That's the emotion that I love from my favorite horror stories, and The Only Good Indians definitely left me with that feeling. All right, next up we have The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. Get some coffee. So this is a solid haunted house mystery story. It will satisfy that itch to read a haunted house story if you're not really looking to be scared that much at all. I'm probably the worst judge of if something's scary or not, for literally anyone but myself, of course. But if you're a fan of this genre and that's what you're looking for, you're gonna find it a little bit weak, or on the weak end of the spooky bits. It's a great story, but it's definitely not super spooky. I often find myself reading YA romance when I want something comfortable that I can predict. But this kind of felt similar to that in the sense that it was definitely predictable, but not in a boring way, just okay. It was satisfying. The unique part of the book is that the house that the couple is moving into is one that they're building themselves. Kind of posing that question is, what if you don't move into a haunted house, but you build one? The story follows a few different people. You have the couple who uproots themselves to build a dream house in the country. You have Olive, the local girl who would much rather these city folks or town folks stay away from her search for treasure on the land. And then you have Hattie, the witch that was hung on the property in the 1920s. The lore behind this story is interesting and so thorough. I did wish the surrounding town was a bit more fleshed out at times. It seemed like a necessary afterthought, at least beyond the weird little seance group that meets in town. Of course, there's a bit of a modern mystery to solve in the story, and everything is somehow connected to Hattie. I found the twists and turns satisfying, if not predictable, and logical. It was kind of a perfect balance of logic and surprise and a little bit of spooky ghostiness. Spooky ghostiness. I like that phrase. All right. Next up, we have Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. This is the second Rory Power novel that I will have reviewed on this channel. Oh my goodness. And it is Rory's second novel. She is so good at writing some crazy, unnerving weirdness. So she is the same author who wrote Wilder Girls. Burn Our Bodies Down is YA, but it also packs a punch of what the fuck. Margot has been raised by her mother, and she has never had a connection to any other family members at all. No father, grandparents, cousins, anything. It's just Margot and her mom, who is a bit strange and really struggles to hold it all together for them. So, as a restless teenager, Margot starts seeking answers to the questions she's always had about her family, but was never able to get answers for. Those answers lead Margot to the town of Faylane, a small town just a few hours away that holds her family. A whole lot of small town creepy weirdness. Margot is a well-developed character that is easy to feel deeply for, especially with the life that she has to lead. Everyone you meet is so fleshed out, and the picture of Faylane is everything it needs to be. The uncanny world created in Burn Our Bodies Down is perfectly haunting. From the first word to the last, there's something wrong with this story. It's subtle and it's unsettling, and it's just great. The conversations are a little off kilter. The atmosphere is off. Margot is odd. Her mother is even odder. And then she gets to Faylane, and you kind of realize that everything that felt wrong at the beginning of the book was supposed to be wrong, because this is where she's from, and everything is wrong here too. Things that happen that control where the path that the plot takes feels quite like a simmer, and you know that it's going to explode, and when it is, it's going to be something that you never expected it to be. This book is definitely as weird as Wilder Girls, as beautiful as Wilder Girls, maybe though a little bit on the better entry point though, if that makes sense. I think that if you've never read Rory Power, you might find Burn Our Bodies Down a little bit less strange than Wilder Girls. It's kind of that Children of the Corn, like, familiar strangeness, where Wilder Girls was just strange. I will definitely be reading everything that Rory Power puts out after having read these two. So, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.